Hi. There are two parts to my presentation. The first part, I believe, is the most critical, and this is what I discovered even more so during lockdown, as some of you might have. And I'm also saying this to earn a few brownie points with my lovely wife sitting here and with my twin boys. I am going to move on to the second part of my presentation with this important nugget having been dispensed with a story. And the story is a story you might have heard before, but it's something that reminds me about why I do what I do. And at the risk of boring some of you, I'm going to repeat it. So the story is about a priest, and a priest who's walking on a mountainside. And as he walks along, he finds a laborer hauling really heavy rocks up the mountain, and he's cursing and saying, "What the hell am I doing?" And he's going up and down. So the priest asks him, "What are you doing?" And he says, "You idiot, can't you see I'm hauling these heavy rocks? And why are you looking unhappy?" "Because I'm hauling these rocks." So the priest says, "Yeah, that makes sense." And he moves ahead, and he sees another guy, and he's carrying even heavier rocks. But he's looking really calm and focused, like John Wick. I actually just saw the film last night. So really like at it, and he goes up to him and says, "What are you doing?" So he says, "I'm earning a living for my family." So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And he moves ahead, and he finds this guy who's carrying like massive boulders, and he's running up and down the mountain and singing and jumping, and he's really puzzled. So he goes up to him and asks him, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm building a church for my master." And that's really a story that stayed with me, and it brings us to the question, we all know what we do, right? And very often when someone asks you, you answer you're an architect or interior designer or whatever else you do, you're a businessman. But how often do we stop and ask ourselves, why am I doing what I'm doing? Is there something slightly larger that brings meaning to what I do? Are there questions about our practice? Are there principles? Are there aspects that bring meaning to why we do what we do? And that's been something foundational to our practice. And over the years, we've developed certain questions. I mean, these are no means a constitution or a charter, but I'd like to share some of those with you. These kind of define and hold us together as a team and guide the process of what we do. We are a process-led practice. So this idea of frugality is really important. For a country like India, making technology inclusive, this idea, which sometimes is called jugaad, I find it demeaning, but this idea of low tech versus high tech, which is scalable in a country like ours. Can we adapt and reuse buildings till the time they've lived their life? So one of the things we do is when a client comes to us, we ask whether do you really need to bring down your existing building? Is there a way we can work with it to bring more value to it? And can we design buildings that are not current, or space that endure, not just qualitatively, aesthetically, poetically, contextually? Since a lot of our clients are HNIs and people who can afford designers, we also realize the role of luxury is to define and set aspirations for the people who are designing themselves. And can we make local aspirational? That's a big part of our pursuit. I'll be sharing some of that in a couple of projects. And one of the aspects of that is contemporarizing craft, taking hand skill, artisanal skill. When I say craft, I don't necessarily mean master craftsman. I'm talking the mistri, a craftsman, a welder, a craftsman. And how does that become increasingly contextual as the world moves on? And this brings us to this idea of really, how does it all happen? We realize that we are very limited in our practice, in our understanding, in our knowledge. And unless we borrow from the repository of everyone working on the project, we can't harness the possibilities that exist. So this meaning that we create for ourselves has to include the client, has to include the contractor, has to include every person engaged at every step. And the only way to do it is moving away from this idea that we are taught So a lot of us are taught that you've got to be really clear about your concept, and the clearer you are, the clearer your drawings are, then everyone can work towards delivering that, right? I mean, that's what we are taught, and that's the idea of modernism or postmodernism. But if we really want to harness what we have in this country, we really look at a process where the end is not greater than the means become more important. And we always hold ourselves back saying, the way it will get done, is that appropriate to what we are doing? And that brings us to what we call an evolutionary model, where we create a framework, say, such as the framework I shared with you, saying, what does this project aspire to do? How does it aspire to do it? What is it addressing? And then share that as a value amongst all the stakeholders, whether it's the client who's funding the project, and infuse it with values such as ecological values, cultural values, social values, and make sure the end result for the client is addressed in a much, much richer way, because the knowledge that's harnessed is not ours alone. It's a collective repository. So what you are then is not an author of the design, but your responsibility is that of being a facilitator, an orchestrator, to make sure that all that immense talent out there is harnessed to deliver what's most appropriate for the project. And this results in a project that's much more inclusive. So it delivers on an emotion and on a learning that transcends your own. And that itself is a reward that you get at the end of it. And you have to work harder. I mean, there's no question. You have to prototype, you have to ideate, you have to test it, you have to come back. So while, I mean, that's one of the things we're struggling with at the studio right now, is you get paid the same fee, but then how do you include all of this as a part of the process? So we have to work twice as hard to get to where we are, but the product at the end is much more rewarding. And hence we look ourselves as one of many change makers possibly in the industry. I'm going to talk about 2 case studies. These are projects I've not shared before, and these are also the ones that were shortlisted for the World Architecture Festival in the finals. In fact, one of them won the building category just a couple of days ago. I mean, both of these, oddly enough, have the same set of collaborators. So what I'm really sharing is a collective effort of the structural engineer, Manjunath, brilliant man, Akshay Kaul, the landscape architect, we worked with him for several years, Mangrove Collective, which does furniture for us for both these projects, Buildcraft, who's the contractor, who took on the challenge of doing something like this because it was extremely challenging. And last but not the least is the fantastic set of colleagues I have at the studio. So this first project has been a journey of watching nature heal the land as much as us building a home. Situated between Bhimtal and Mukteshwar in the Kumaon region of Uttarakhand, the site is at a height of 2,000 meters above sea level and rises through an elevation of 400 meters over an incline of 1 kilometer. So slopes vary between 25 to 40 degrees. We all know that a lot of people are now looking for second homes in hills around Delhi, and this has led to massive, rampant, insensitive construction by private developers, a lot because there are no codes in rural areas and because they're looking to make a quick buck. The region has abundant rainfall, but the breakdown of old rainwater catchment systems has led to a scarcity of water, which is true from actually most parts of the country. Destabilization of slopes, destruction of green cover, makes it increasingly prone to landslides, as we've just recently seen in the past few years. So when a client approached us to do a luxury hillside development, we were wary of taking it on. And in fact, initially we pushed back saying we were not sure what he wanted to do. However, over several meetings, we found that he shared our values and our vision. And we set out almost like a little charter, primarily saying, can we give back to the land as much as we take from it? And that sounds a bit oxymoronic because you're building on it, so how can you give back more? But the land hadn't been taken care of very well, and that gave us an opportunity. Could we build in a way that we tread lightly on the ground and perhaps even enrich the ecosystem? So for the master planning exercise, we worked closely with Akshay. The first step we did was map out the slopes, the surface drainage patterns, because those are critical in hillsides. What was the natural flow of water, the vegetation, and at the intersection of all these three, we figured out the areas we could build on which did not impede on any of these areas. We laid out a network of roads which was responsive to the terrain. And we came up with a master plan which was only 70 homes on 88 acres with a ground coverage of less than 5%. How did we make it financially viable? Was one, making the buyers pay for the common amenities. So we developed a community-like approach where a lot of amenities, instead of building them into the homes, they were built into common areas. There are no boundary walls. There is free access across the whole 88 acres. So everyone, when they buy a home, they experience buying into the 88-acre experience. And that allows the development, the home to pay for keeping this sparse kind of approach. We created a goal of being net surplus on water requirements, which was a first in that region. And for the first 2 years, the client agreed to work only on the ecological regeneration of the site, which was amazing. So even before the first house construction started, we worked on reducing the surface runoff, minimize soil erosion through a network of check dams and gully plugs, dry stone, no cement used. So far, more than 300 of these have been finished. And within just 3 seasons of rainfall, water levels in shallow wells on site and even the villages downstream have come up more than they have in the last 20 years. And that's been immensely rewarding. So, you know, usually when a developer builds, you kind of disrupt the ecosystem around of rural networks. In this case, they've come up and supported this because it's added value to their villages. To prevent soil erosion and stabilize the site, we moved away from building large concrete retaining walls. And with Akshay and Dr. Madhusudan from Nepal, we created bioengineering techniques such as brush layering, hydro seeding. So those are before and after pictures you can see over the 2 years. And bamboo crib walls where live bamboo is planted along with woven bamboo to generate retaining for the hillside. Infrastructure, and of course we did a lot of reforestation. So thousands of native trees such as oak, rhododendron, along with native shrubs and trees that don't require irrigation. Infrastructure is being planned as a distributed hub and spoke network. Rainwater runoffs from the roof is collected and supplied through a gravity-fed network. So nobody owns the water. So if I collect water in my house, my tank supplies water to your house. You know, so that we can use gravity, and we have about 30 lakh liters of captive rainfall at site at any given point in time. That's what we're designing for. The home that I'm going to show you now is, and of course we've also got biodigesters for 100% of the wastewater to be recycled and reused in a dual plumbing system. So the first home was in a clearing on site on a slope of 40 degrees, which by traditional methods, in fact the local contractor said you can't build on this slope. And the reason we chose this slope is because the more buildable sites in conventional terms were good for farming, orchards, and forest. So the framework was conceptualized by the very clever Manjunath. It mimics the structure of the trees and with a narrow base that lightens and spreads as it moves up. It's built over 3 levels, so it's a vertical construction to reduce the footprint on the ground, save the trees, maximize views, and the stilts allow for the water to continue to flow under the house without disrupting the flow. Localized stepped foundations along the slope allow for minimal excavation, unlike almost no cut and fill. And one of the mandates we set up that we will not bring heavy machinery to site, because when you set up a heavy crane and move girders around and move material, it kills the entire site and the trees around. So the structure is designed as a basket-like weave of lightweight steel tubes, and each member has been designed so that 3 to 4 people can manually carry it and assemble it. So it's like a little Lego block, and you build as you go along and you kind of keep constructing using the deck slabs, which are thin deck slabs with only 3 inches of concrete as a scaffolding. The gap in the weave, so it's a woven structure which gives it the strength, allows the movement of surfaces and maximizes internal heights. So the home is designed to achieve European passive house benchmarks, the first of its kind in the mountains in India. And passive design techniques, of course, studies in daylight, solar gain, etc., are obviously there. But the main thing is the construction system, where we moved away from wet work and we worked with dry construction techniques with insulated walls, and it's a multi-layered insulated wall. which keeps the U values at almost 1/3 that of stone walls, which brings the energy requirements down to less than 50% of a regular old-fashioned stone cottage, bringing down heating energy and loads. The material palette builds on the vocabulary of the Kumaoni vernacular. So we have forest certified timber and slate shingles weaving through this metal structure to form an external rain screen. The interiors are a combination of the client's earlier pieces from his earlier home, combined with new pieces that build a regional narrative through the textiles. So there are some classic pieces that he already had. We've woven that in with artworks, that we commissioned and developed using local artisans. So it's kind of integrates together to form an eclectic palette within the relatively contemporary expression of the main house. This ramped boardwalk leads to the main door. We know that wood carving is a popular craft in Kumaoni culture, and these local artisans handcrafted the timber frames and doors and the panels inside. The entry level consists of a foyer, a powder room, living and dining with north and south decks. The living room, to the left is the staircase that connects to the upper level and lower level, and the kitchen and utility on the west face are serviced by an independent entry and a service staircase. So what you see here is the foyer that opens up towards the elevator. So we've got elevators in the house to ensure universal accessibility. So all the homes have handicapped access, something that's very rare in the hills. We've designed the siting to be such. That's the living room that connects to a semi-covered outside deck that's perched among the trees. The dining area has a conservatory structure towards the south that brings in the south sun and opens up onto the courtyard on the south. The upper level has a den flanked by 2 master bedrooms, and the stairs open into this den, which has a fireplace that connects to an open to sky deck, which is flanked on either side by bedrooms. Each of these bedrooms have bay windows overlooking the views and that project into the forest. Skylights with retractable blinds in all the rooms bring in the winter sun, and at night capture the intense starlit skies that one doesn't get to see in Delhi at all. The lower level has a guest suite, staff quarters, and a storage area. The staircase opens up to the guest bedroom, which has its own deck. There's also connection to the beautiful semi-covered landscape, which leads down through a cobbled mountain path to a bamboo deck over one of the springs that has come alive post our ecological restoration. All the services of the house, such as the MEP room and pumps, are tucked in below the floating south court, easily accessible from the service staircase. The house within the forest evokes a feeling of being perched among the trees. The upper level bedrooms and deck nestled within the tree cover. The living room at level 0, the guest bedroom at -1 with the verandas nestled within the forest. The cantilevered projections bring the forest into the room, and the east elevation of the house finds itself gently perched on the slope. The south elevation of the house merging into the landscape, and the original intent of having the house disappear into the forest. The second project is something we've done for the clients we've worked with in the past on a couple of projects. We've been very fortunate to have a partnership with them, which allows us to continue to experiment with what hospitality in the country needs to be. So the site is set between Jaipur and Jodhpur on a dam, which is an oasis of 600 acres of regenerated forest by the original owners, flanked by a 150-year-old rainwater check dam. This was built by the then ruler as an irrigation reservoir. For the third generation of his descendants had been running it as a wildlife camp since 2005. In the 90s, they'd stopped water-intensive farming on the land and allowed for it to be overtaken by native trees into a thriving forest, which is a home to hundreds of species of migratory birds and wild animals, such as deer and boar, with the occasional leopard sighting. With temperatures in summer hitting over 45 degrees Celsius, the tented resort was seasonal from March to October, and they were finding it difficult to sustain the property. So they leased out the property to new owners, the Raas owners, in 2019, whose goals were to increase the number and upgrade the tents, upgrade the public spaces and amenities, with the aim of doubling the revenues. For this, they needed to turn the camp into a perennial one, open throughout the year, and do this in a way that retained the lightness of the original approach and the connection to the site's unique setting. On the other side, we were dealing with temperatures from burning 46 degrees in summer to a chilling 2 degrees Celsius in winter. And one had to keep in mind the fragile load-bearing capacity of the 150-year-old dam. And last but not the least, the whole project from design to build was about 10 months because the business plan only allowed them that. So the old program had circulation and services already mapped out, and for minimum disruptions, we built on the existing scheme that was there. The old structures had no privacy either from the circulation path on the dam or the open areas in front, and only offered lake views, ignoring the lush sunset forest views, using the dam as a corridor. The services were buried underground and were messy to maintain. Our primary move was to create tent-like air-conditioned insulated pods on an elevated lightweight deck with privacy screens segregating them and a sunken circulation path on the west side facing forest. This allowed us to create stronger lines of sight on both sides of the tents and run services off the ground for easy maintenance. A skylight over the bed frames the intense star-studded night skies, heightened by the lack of ambient light in the remote forest. The structural system works on shallow isolated piles made from hewn pipes rammed with lime and waste stone. Over this, a lightweight custom-built metal structure gets bolted. Infill slabs of local Chittar sandstone form the deck and finish floor in one go, so there's no screeding, no cladding. A double-skin drywall thermally seals the structure, and an outer covering of heat-reflecting tensile fabric on both the roof and the walls completes both the waterproofing and the tent narrative. The continuous line of structures elevated off the ground allowed us to maximize the number of rooms to 16, increase insulation and privacy, and ease out running all services as a single unit across the whole site without having to excavate the sensitive topsoil of the dam. Needless to say, all the rainwater is captured and the wastewater is biologically recycled. So that's the construction process over month 1, month 2, month 3, month 5. The master plan shows the entrance drop-off at number 2, arrival courtyard at number 5, the old stairs branching off at either the boardwalk leading to the tents at number 8 or further up to the open courtyard leading to the multifunctional restaurant bar that also serves as a reception. So there's just one public building which overlooks the pool and deck on number 7. Number 13 is the kitchen and back of house services, which overlooks the organic garden at 4 that serves the kitchen and also has an independent service entrance. I'll talk about the guest pods in some detail now. The plan of the pod strongly extends the indoor-outdoor connect with shaded verandas and open-to-sky gardens on both sides. And when the dual sliding timber doors are open, it makes for a seamless connect from sunrise over the lake to sunset over the forest. This inside-outside connect follows through in the bathrooms, where the linear slivers capture the lake views from the bathtub and the forest views from the toilet. The sunken boardwalk leads up two individual stairs that reveal a framed view of the lake. The interior scheme stays away from traditional Rajasthani heritage cliches and instead chooses to focus on indigenous techniques interpreted in a contemporary way to bridge the forest and wildlife narrative through the idiom of a camping tent. We collaborated with Dhani Behel, a printmaker who works in Delhi, who reinterpreted traditional Rajasthani miniatures, art forms, and created an indigenous flora and fauna story, and took the tradition of small woodblock printing and carved out massive woodblocks to manually print handloom fabrics with these motifs that were developed from the site. This is further layered with hand-embroidered birds and animals found on the property. This narrative continues to appear in woodwork details such as these hand-carved air conditioning unit covers, All the furniture is custom designed and built in local oil finished acacia, which is kikar, and builds on the romance of the handcrafted details of camping furniture of the old. These organic compositions come together to create a happy surprise waiting to be discovered by guests as they use the space. Each tent is different in composition and colorway to create diverse moods for returning guests. This is the complete tent framing the forest view, the skylight over the bed. That's the lake view and the lake facing veranda and bathtub. As you move out, you see the colonnade of private decks from the lake, and you can see how they merge into the datum of this old dam, with the public space framed at the right corner, which I'll talk about next, which we call the Baradari, derived from the traditional 12-pillared columns, 12-pillared pavilions of Rajasthan, which literally translates into a gathering space. Perched on the edge of the dam, the spaces follow a similar hierarchy as the tents, with wraparound shaded verandas overlooking the lake to one side and the pool and the deck towards the other. The inner space of the building is designed with double doors that fold into the immaculately detailed sandstone fins for 6 months a year, so that the whole building functions like a naturally ventilated pavilion for these 6 months. This building is made again with dry construction. We got almost no cement to site. That holds 2 slabs, double slabs of 3 meter tall, that means 10 feet tall Chittar sandstone with insulation sandwiched in between. The roof also is made from sandstone slabs with waterproofing and lime mortar sourced from neighboring quarries. All the surfaces within reach of guests are hand-dressed Chittar stone, and all details, including the air conditioning grills, are hand-cut at site by artisans from the region. This is the building viewed from a boat on the lake, a view showing the connection of the veranda to the interior, the east-facing veranda, the south elevation and courtyard where sunbeds are set up in winter, and campfires in the evening as the building becomes a lantern on the dam. Internally, the stone slabs are assembled to create an air conditioning duct that wraps around the interior, while graphically, the interior takes forward the same scheme as we used in the tents, but hand chiseled on stone instead. The multifunctional buffet island counter, which is also a bar, anchors the space and is hand-etched with flamingos that come to nest by the lake in winter. The west veranda overlooks the sundowner pool deck, the pavilion lighting up over the pool as the sun sets. This is framed by the reclaimed stone from site for the back of house building that connects below to the entrance experience, a traditional stepwell framing the small ancient shrine that existed at site that houses the deity that guards the dam. To keep the camp alive and interactive over its lifespan, we built in several elements that need to be maintained by the women of the neighboring village as a daily ritual, such as the clay-lined courtyards, the lime powder rangolis. Even the signages for the rooms are in mud and lime and need to be redone periodically. I now have a film that captures the experience of being at the camp.